You are my land,
Africa,
my mother.
Mama Africa,
You are my soul,
Africa,
my queen.
Mama Africa,
You are my hope,
Africa,
my strength.
Mama Africa,
I'm crying,
Africa,
'cause I miss you.
Mama Africa,
I want to praise you.
Africa.
Sing for
Bonjour chers téléspectateurs et bienvenue à l'émission Ondes africaines. Aujourd'hui nous recevons un grand professeur, il est aussi chef en termes africains, c'est-à-dire chef coutumier. Il a été intronisé en Afrique. Vous l'avez suivi dans certaines de nos émissions antérieures et il revient aujourd'hui nous parler des événements qui se passent en Afrique et de la vie ici à Toronto. Welcome, Professor George DEI. Lately, we did a program, and that program was very well received by the community, by our community. And I'm glad you're here. You're here again to talk more about what is going on in the world, in Africa, and here, especially here in Canada. How have you been?
Well, pretty good, pretty good. I think I have been away on sabbatical.
Sabbatical
in Ghana, but I also visited Nigeria and Kenya.
Nigeria and Kenya?
Yeah, right.
Whoa.
Doing research.
That's
yeah,
good.
but I also took some time to relax, and also I did some writing, right? So it's a combination of things, but I'm pretty good, right?
I'm glad to hear that.
I'm
glad to hear that. So tell us a little bit, how is life in Africa now? Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
Well, I mean, Africa is still, Africa, there are many positive things to say about the continent, but we also are going through some challenges. And of late, there are issues about democracy. Some countries are better than others in terms of democracy, which is defined broadly, not just the ballot, but also in terms of economic, education, health. But I think it's a continent that is still searching for its own voice. There are many challenges, but there are also people who are doing some excellent work on the continent, which we need to highlight and talk about.
That's good. We're going to get there. But you see, people lost track of you.
Right.
They have not been hearing from you. Especially if we look at the past, you have been writing books and you are the voice for the African, especially in schooling and anti-racism. I don't know where you are now with this issue.
Well, I've been doing some writings. I haven't stopped. I've been doing some writings. And as I said, I've been doing some research. I think I'm just waiting for all the information to come together before you come out with some findings and talk about some of the issues. But I've been around. It's just that these days I've been spending some time away doing research and also taking some rest. And it's true I've not been much in the news, but it doesn't mean that
that's what
I'm not doing my work.
That's what explains your silence.
Exactly.
Even though people are saying you're quiet, you're silent, but you have been working.
Well, I've been working, yeah. And there are many ways to get your message across. I think those who know me, they know that I keep insisting on the things that I think is best for our community, or what I think we all ought to do. It doesn't mean I have a monopoly on what is right, but I think we all have to bring our voices together so that we talk about the issues and ensure that our community gets what it deserves.
But the other thing people have been asking, you mentor many people, professors, students, who are successful today. And how do you feel about that?
Well, I think that's what we all ought to do. I was mentored by somebody, right? I think we all didn't start from somewhere. Somebody had to give us a helping hand. We had opportunities and we took advantage of that. And I always believe that we also have a responsibility when we get to where we are to help mentor others. And that's why mentorship has been a very
big... That's the basic of African value. How will you call it again? Hospitality, sharing. Yeah, we need to help each other.
Right? Yeah. And I think that you see, you get joy, satisfaction when at the end of the day, somebody comes to you and say, "Thank you very much for sharing your ideas with me." Ideas don't exist in the heads of only one person. I think collectively we all come together and create ideas. And so for me, this aspect of mentorship is very, very central. We don't have a solution to all the problems, but at least we can talk about the issues and collectively come to some decisions as to what we need to do. So I'm very happy with people, when I see people who are now doing some of the work that we all have been doing. It tells us that at least the message is getting around.
And on top of that, you are the chief.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. That's, it's interesting because I've enjoyed that.
It
aspect.
is,
Yes,
as African, it's a basic,
Yes.
it's a clue.
Yeah,
The most important thing, because, go ahead, please.
No,
I don't want to interrupt.
And it's not the position itself, it's what you do with the position that is very, very important.
What you do.
Yeah, and I think to me, when you offer, because you see, to be made a chief or to be made an elder, it means you have something that the community recognizes. It's a sort of respect and a sort of trust that the community puts into you. And so you have an obligation and responsibility not to betray that trust, right? And I think to me, when as part of a team, you're able to achieve something, that gives me satisfaction, that gives me pleasure. There are many challenges that are said that I think we have to think about as a community. And that's why it's very, very important that leadership becomes critical. Right? Leadership which is able to listen, which is able not only to lead, but also sometimes follow, right? You cannot just
listen
and follow, also. Right? Yeah. And then, of course, you lead. Leader, you lead. But sometimes you have to follow. And it's, when I say follow, let some of this movement be organic, and then listen to what people are saying, and then also follow the advice that they give you, and that's what I mean by follow. But as a leader, you have to take the initiative. You are out there, and people want to hear you, hear your voice, and see what initiatives you want to put forward. But you can do that if you work together as a community.
As a community.
Yeah, one thing I always say is that any community is as good as we collectively work to make it. And that means you and I, everybody here, we have a responsibility to create the communities that we want. The community is not there. We create the communities.
We create it.
We create communities, right? And that's why it's very, very important to work together and create the community.
But on the same page, I have a question.
Right.
What do you think about the African community here in Toronto, and especially youth, young people? What do you think, where they are?
Well, let's break it down into a couple of things. I think the African community here, right, we have a long history. I think every historian will tell you that we just didn't come yesterday. We've been here for many, many years.
For many years, even before some Europeans.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
and we've helped in the building of Canada. We continue to make Canada what it is today, right? And so the community, I think, has that history, and that history has to teach us something.
But how come the people don't teach it? I don't know. You know better than me, Professor. Yeah.
And I think we can't wait on somebody to teach our history. We have to teach our own history. I think in our homes we have to teach our history. We have to teach about our presence. That we didn't come just yesterday. We came a long time ago. We have contributed to make this society what it is. We have been part of a collectivity that makes Canada what it is today, and we have a responsibility to teach it. That is history. But history is not just simply about what happened yesterday. It's also about how we create today and how we look forward to the future. So we make histories, right? And as a community, we have to continue to create our future, to design our future, right, in order to address some of the challenges that we face. You asked a question about what is happening to our community. I think there are many successes we can talk about when we look at our community, right? If we go into our communities, and it's not just one community. It's communities.
Black communities, communities. An aggregation of communities.
If you go into these communities, there are mothers who are struggling, who are working very, very hard to put food on the table for their children. We have fathers too who are playing their roles that are expected of fathers. And we have those who also, despite all the challenges and obstacles, are also trying very, very hard to succeed. Of course, we do have some problems, right? And nobody wants to sweep them under the carpet, right? There are problems which have to do with jobs, education, health. These need to be addressed, right? And we have to continue to let our voices to be heard on that, right? And then our youth. You asked a question about our youth. We have very, very creative, resourceful youth that we can talk about. We also have some youth who are also struggling, right? Who have fallen through the cracks, right? Who have no sense of the future, who are, in many cases, leading a life of a dead-end existence. And we also have to collectively come together to address that. We cannot keep these issues under the carpet, right? I think, for me, those who have been successful have a responsibility to help those who are struggling through life to make success happen to everybody. And that's, to me, I think the challenge, right? So when I hear about, for example, our communities, when we have challenges which have to do with homes, people not doing their responsibilities or playing their part, right? Or when we have families that are breaking down because of things sometimes beyond their control, or when we have youth who get into social problems, right? I think we have to talk about that and find a way to collectively address that. But I always believe that many problems that we have in the community are problems that have to be looked at from their roots, the systemic nature of the problem. We cannot have solutions that are haphazard, like ad hoc.
It's like treating a sickness.
Yes.
You treat the symptom.
Yes,
Instead
exactly.
of going to the blood, you need to go check the blood. What is
Exactly.
inside?
Exactly.
And then you know
Exactly.
where the symptoms
Yeah.
are coming.
Ex-
Okay, thank you, Professor. Thank you very much, Professor. Chers téléspectateurs, on va prendre une pause et on revient dans quelques 2 minutes. Nous voici de retour, chers téléspectateurs. Nous recevons dans ces studios le professeur George DEI. Il est professeur à l'Université de Toronto à OSI, mais il est aussi chef coutumier en Afrique, tout comme dans le monde noir. Donc partout où il y a des Noirs, en tant que chef, il est chef. Vous l'avez entendu. Il nous a parlé des événements en Afrique, de sa visite récente en Afrique. Il nous a parlé donc de la vie ici à Toronto, comment nous devons être organisés, nous, les Noirs. Maintenant, je vais lui poser la question concernant ce qui se passe actuellement en Afrique et dans le monde. Thank you, Professor George DEI. You show us, you did explain to us how we should get together
Right.
to build this community of ours. The other question, things are happening in the world now.
Right.
There are some current global developments, some events taking place
Yeah.
in Africa,
Yeah.
Ivory Coast, Libya,
Yeah.
Morocco,
Yeah.
and elsewhere.
Yeah.
I would like to know your
Yeah.
view, your reading on
Yeah.
all of those
Yeah.
developments.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think there are a lot of developments taking place at the global scale, right? And I think part of it is that yearning for people to define their own future, to define their own aspirations and to meet them, right? So the whole issue of democracy, for example, has come up, right? And it's not just democracy in terms of just going to the ballot, right? I think if you look at the events that are happening in North Africa and also looking at the events even in the Arab world, right? It's a grassroots uprising, which has to do with the economic conditions of people, the economic situation that people find themselves. The fact that we have a number of youth, right, who are highly educated, right, and yet don't have jobs, right, and that economic insecurity, right, combined with a yearning that, look, you know what, we can't have a better world, and we have to fight to create that better world, right? That we cannot have these rulers, some of these rulers who have been in power for over 40 years, and not see any change in their lives. And there's a lot of frustration, a lot of anger. And what you see is an uprising for genuine involvement, a genuine concern about the future. And you see youth working with other academics and other members of their community to be able to define their own future. And I think this means it's healthy, right?
And mostly it has been done by young people.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's young people who are saying, look, the future also belongs to us, right? The future belongs to us, and we should be able to design it. We should be able to have a voice that talks about how we create that future, right? What is happening in some of these countries, right? When we look politically, for example, right? We have some of these rulers who have been in power for years, who somehow think that they were destined to rule forever, that the leadership belongs to their family, right? And they don't want to abdicate the throne. They don't want to give power and that. And I think people are becoming sick and tired of that. And I think that's what is happening, right? And in some cases, unfortunately, they are being met with repression. They are being met with guns. People are losing their lives. And my point is, I hope many of these lives that have been lost are not lost in vain. I think this should send a powerful message that there's a sort of economic insecurity which is combined with politics. that says that we need to create a better world, a better future for everyone. And unless we do that, we're going to have these uprisings happening all over the place, right? I mean, you mentioned the case of Ivory Coast, for example, where we have a situation where somebody who has lost an election, right, refuses to go simply because they have a sense that they have to rule, right? And that's it creates uncertainty, unease, and people lose their lives through that process. And there must be a better way. There must be a better way that says that, you know what, nobody was destined to rule forever, right? That you come into these positions, after a while you have to give power back to the people, and then people decide who they want as future leaders. And I think that's what is happening.
I remember we have president like Senghor from Senegal.
Right.
He just left the power. He say, okay, somebody else take over. I'm going back to my academic life to continue the French institution. And the other, Nyerere, I think Nyerere from Tanzania, he left without problem. And there is also one, I think, or even Mandela. Mandela also, I know he was old, but he left.
And there's so many examples, and I think that caused some of these success cases, right? My own country, Ghana, for example.
Ghana, thank you.
Where, I mean, we had a change of government over a tiny fraction of the votes, right, that determined the next government, right? In other places, a lot of lives could have been shared through that process. And I think, to me, all what this tells us, right, is that people can define their future. They want a voice in the making of that future. That when it comes to politics, politics is conflated with issues of economics, with issues of security, right? That a lot of these youth, right, they have come to the streets to protest, not just simply about leadership, but also about the sort of future that they are being dealt with. And they find it very...
Professor, sorry to cut. I'm very sorry.
Right.
I wonder sometimes if our leaders, if they read, if they have time to read, or if they go to best school, because they know very well when economy is down, is low, politics must go down. So why they cannot take care of the economy first?
It's the whole thing about, power corrupts, right? Somehow when they come onto these positions, right, they think they are everything to the world, right? They think they have been destined to
because
rule.
they're getting billions
and they have the money. And sometimes some of these governments have been prompt, right, been supported by some of these powers that at the same time are now struggling.
The other thing, Professor, look at, for example, Mobutu. Look at now Mubarak and all of
Gaddafi.
them. Gaddafi. They have billions outside the countries. And now they're freezing everything. You know what? The money is not going back to Africa.
Well, I think
it's going to stay in the Swiss bank. It's going to stay in the United States. It's going to stay here in Canada. And so what they thinking, those people, Professor?
No, you're right. I mean, and this is the biggest challenge, right? That I think, to me, we have to ask the question about, are these monies going to go back to these countries, right? It's so amazing when these countries are struggling, right, for development, health, education, transport, whatever you can think of, right? When these countries are struggling, yet these leaders have stashed millions of their money in overseas banks. I would say that part of the struggle also has to be getting this money back into these countries.
And we won't get it. We have an example of Mobutu, 6th richest person in the world with 13 billion at that time. 13 billion. He didn't get, I mean, his family didn't get any. Congo didn't get any money. And we have, even if you go to what country? Philippines, Marcos. Marcos has money all over the world. And the Philippines didn't get that money. I must be wrong, but they didn't get the money back.
But I think that's what you're saying. I think that there comes a point, right, when we have to talk about Western complicity, not only in terms of how they support these governments, but also historically how the issues of development, right, they are implicated in development. And for example, is what we're talking about, right, that look, when these countries are struggling, right, when they have to pay to get basic necessities of life, right, we have their leaders sashing up their money in these Western countries, and yet these monies do not go back to the people. That's hypocrisy. It's hypocrisy.
That's true. I agree
It has to
with
be
you.
addressed,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So I call that Western complicity in the making of the problem, right? And that has to be addressed, right? Of course, we also have to talk about, I mean, when we talk about democracy, it's not just simply the ballot, going to the ballot, right? It's also about having in place governance that responds to the needs of the people. So issues about health, education, employment, right, have to be addressed,
Yeah.
right? So they are all intertwined.
Yeah.
You cannot separate politics from economics, from education, from health. And these issues have to be addressed. And I think unless we have a mindset that allows us to address these problems in conjunction, we are going to have this history repeating itself, repeating itself, repeating itself. Personally, I like very much these uprisings that are taking place. I'm not so much concerned about questions about leadership, right? There's a concern that, oh, we don't know who are behind these uprisings. Well, the people are behind it.
Young people.
The young people are behind it.
Yeah.
So this concern about leadership, you can't have democracy, right, only when it suits your interest. Then you say, well, I'm for that democracy. Democracy must be democracy, period, right? People have to decide.
Yeah.
Sometimes they may decide in a way that you don't like it.
It used to be like that long time ago for those who study the history. And I know you're a professor, I'm sorry.
No.
If you look at the history of recent, let's
Right.
call it recent history
Right.
of Egypt, Aton, the god Aton of the Pharaoh Aton, has to split with his son
Yeah.
Akhenaton,
Yeah.
who went to form what we call today Middle East.
Yeah.
All of that used to be Africa.
Yeah.
And you saw the separation.
Yeah.
People say, enough, enough is enough.
No.
So they did some
Yeah.
kind of revolution.
Evolution,
And
yeah.
the same thing is
Yeah.
happening today.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
and that's what I mean. I think unless we look at the historic, the institutional and systemic dimensions of the problems we're dealing with, right,
Yeah.
we cannot have genuine solutions, right? I think we have to look at it, otherwise we'll come back to what people call square one, right? Unless we address them, right? Unless we address the undercurrents, what is furthering or fostering some of these uprisings,
Uprising,
right?
yeah.
They have to do with jobs, they have to do with security, they have to do with
Economy, yeah.
economy, they have to do with education, right? And it's more than just simply saying people want to just be able to change governments, right? They want governments that are responsible. They want leadership that listens. They want leadership
Yeah.
that meets the needs of communities. They don't want leadership that stands up to the whims and caprices of the powers that be.
So,
They
yeah,
don't want
I
leadership, right?
I understand,
That
yeah.
is so much concerned with how much they can make and stash the money in somebody's country. They don't want leadership that fails to hear the cries, the suffering of their people. And unless we have leadership that is able to do the things we're talking about, we're going to have these uprisings, right?